Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda, Citiesabc YouTube podcast series. We are a fast-growing YouTube podcast thought leadership series and channel focused on profiling the leaders of our time and inspiring people, thought leaders, CEOs, authors, and technology people, and as well academics that are changing and shifting the narrative towards our world. We are in amid a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities as well. And although sometimes if you look at the news, you might think that we are in a very dystopic world, we have fantastic things happening as well. So in this podcast series and the YouTube channel, we've been as well highlighting ideas, products, inventions, software, especially people, profiles, careers, and as well people that actually can create solutions, narratives, and as well can actually understand our time and come up with actually ideas and ways to cope with the challenge we have, the problems, but as well coming up with solutions, because I think every question has an answer. And if you stick with the questions, we won't get any answers. So we want to focus on that. So this YouTube channel and series are, of course, part of the Citiesabc.com platform. That is a platform to create a wiki list and the terminal for cities and for all of us citizens and the organizations. And as well, in partnership with the openbusiness.org, openbusinesscouncil.org, there is a platform for creating a directory for businesses and the personalities around the business and the directing teams that uses blockchain and artificial intelligence. This is, of course, distributed in the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and a lot of other channels. So today we have someone that I've been interacting for a long time and that I have a big respect and honor as well to be speaking with. So Effie Pilarinu, and I hope I spell it right, although I know her for a long time, you only need to repeat it. I studied Old Greek, but it was a long time ago. So Effie is an independent finance, fintech, and blockchain global thought leader and advisor. She's been one of the top experts in fintech and finance in most of the lists worldwide, from Analytica to Thinkers 360 and a lot of other platforms. And she's as well a PhD in finance and a seasoned Wall Street professional with a strong career in Wall Street and in the financial industry. And recently as well, one of the leading fintech, not just influencer, but as well a researcher, writer, and as well someone that has been actually making very solid research into what is happening on this. So she's been listed in a lot of lists as #1 women influencer in the world in fintech, #3 in the financial sector, and as well in a lot of different lists. And as well, one of the things that I really like about her work is the way she's been creating the platform Daily Fintech, which has been engaged with a lot of topics around the present and future of finance and everything, all the challenge that we've been having as well. She's as well a huge audience around LinkedIn, Twitter. And LinkedIn, she's close to 200,000 followers, which is a big achievement, and congratulations for that. And as well, she's been participating in multiple books, like the author of the Wiley Fixed Income books with Frank Fabozzi, and as well an author in the Wealth Tech book by Wiley for 2019. And as well, she was part of my book that is the 4AR AI Blockchain Fintech How to Reinvent a Nation. So I could actually go for a lot of more things. Effie, it's an honor to have you here, and I wanted to have this, although we've been profiling our websites, but I wanted to have a talk face-to-face and as well about all the topics we're facing in our times.
It's a pleasure. I mean, we saw each other in early March when I was in London. That was the last trip for a blockchain conference there, and the last sort of trip with a focus like that. So it's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for all the introduction and the briefing. May I add, there's a new book that is coming out by Springer, The Theories of Change, and I've contributed a chapter on that. And I say because it's interesting, you know, these processes, books take long time, especially from the big publications houses. And I was looking at the chapter that I wrote several months ago, to make sure that, you know, my perception and my views and my insights haven't changed. And I say this because, we dwell in innovation and in change. And really, we have experienced lately a lot of changes at several levels. So I'm wary of that, of looking at how I viewed things, 6 months ago or a year ago, and what has happened. And I'm sure it's the same for you too, right?
It is a very crazy world. I think, especially with COVID-19, like you said, March was the last time that probably both of us travel. And if you travel right now, you need to be in quarantine. So it's a big change for everything, for our economic ecosystem, financial ecosystem. And there's a lot of questions I want to ask on that level. So I want to start by your background. I think it's particularly interesting because now you're a global thought leader in the areas of fintech and finance, as we just mentioned, but I want to start with your basis. You come from Greece, which is actually the birth of democracy and the birth as well of civilization as we know it. Most of the global myths and all the things come from there. But I would like to see how from Greece you became this global, now based in Switzerland. A bit of that background. I think it's important for people to have a bit of your personal history.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually was born on the island of Zakynthos, which is part of the Ionian Islands between Greece and Italy. And the history, the cultural history of that region of Greece is important to understand because it was the part of Greece that was never occupied by the Ottomans when Greece was occupied for 400 years. But rather occupied from the Venetians or the British. So there's a very different culture there. I grew up there, and I must say from the early days of my childhood, I had a huge curiosity for the world. I learned English at a very early stage. I wanted to learn French. I did so without many means, and I used to write poems. So that's where I was coming from. And then in my early middle school years, I was lucky enough to have an amazing math teacher who became my idol. And I only wanted to study mathematics, theoretical mathematics. That's what I did. I wanted to do research in topology. And that's really where I'm coming from. And I still believe that the analytical thinking that mathematics as a language offers is not comparable with any other science. And then life brought a change for me because I really wanted to do a doctorate degree, and I couldn't do that in Greece. And I decided that I should go to the US. And that's how I did my PhD and my MBA in finance, because I was connected with a professor that was my professor of differential equations and was in the US. And he connected me with business school in the US, and that's how I got to do that. And then I did my PhD on chaos theory. This is the late 80s, early 90s, and how it affected the stock market. So you see where I'm coming from. I thought I would follow a more academic career, but I got a job offer from Salomon Brothers in New York. And I've always been a very open person. I love to explore new things. For me, being in innovation in a context that allows me to learn more and open my horizons has always been important. So I started my career on Wall Street at Salomon Brothers, a very particular culture there that allowed me to see how different thinkers, what Matteo Rizzi calls in his book misfits, corporate misfits. There were a lot of them at Salomon Brothers during that time in the early 90s. And I had the luxury of being around them and understanding what it means to think differently, and at a very fast pace, because obviously Wall Street was for decades, I would say, the more fast-paced corporate environment that one could be dwelling in. Even on Wall Street, I moved around a couple of times. In a decade, I moved 4 times. And I was always moving to explore different departments, different areas, different companies. And I had something, an insight, a sense of where the trend was. So I was moving from fixed income derivatives to emerging markets, to Latin America, and the timing was always good, despite the fact that I lived through several crises, Mexico crisis, Brazil crisis, emerging markets, and so on. So that taught me a lot. And then my life changed because I got married in New York with a Greek diplomat. And that led me to traveling the world. I've lived in 6 countries, and in every one of those, I worked, I reinvented myself. I did different things. I've worked as a corporate executive consultant. I've worked part-time teaching at McGill University in Canada. I've worked for a hedge fund in California, doing fundraising for them while living in Europe. And that brings me to Switzerland, where I've been for 7 years. And that is where I completely said, I'm only going to be focusing on innovation. And I did it the way that feels right for me. So what does that mean? For me, it's all about sharing my understanding of what is going on, my own perspective of how financial services are being transformed globally, and bringing the perspective that I have because of my finance background, but also the rest, the multicultural perspective, and I would say the social human understanding that one gains over time with their experience. Because nowadays, I think it's wrong to think of disconnected areas. So, my area is fintech, and therefore I don't understand anything else. You cannot not understand anything else. You have to be able to connect, the social trends, politics and money. I always wonder why in our schooling, in my schooling, I got a PhD in finance, and it did not have any history lessons. I think of it today, and I still think that it is completely crazy. We can talk about this. We can go on a tangent about why, money and finances are not taught from an early stage, because, yes, they are not the means to an end, but they're an integral part of our life. And we need to understand it. And that is the only way that we can bring purpose and intention in how we do business, which is and has been all about financial results, right? We're not taught in our cultures that we need to maximize the economic value, which is much broader than the financial value, right? The economic value is much more about what we are doing, what the value that we are producing, be it some material we're making tables, we're making computers, or be it a service. We're in the software business or we are in the touring business. The question is, what economic impact does it have? And that includes the ecology, it includes how we treat communities, people, all the intangible values that we care about. I think I'll take a pause here and we can pick on any of the topics that I touched upon and talk a little bit more about those.
No, that's a lot of things that I let you speak because it's quite fascinating. But I want to go. So I think it's a very interesting point that you mentioned. You studied your PhD in theory of chaos, which is quite, or at least related with chaos, and change, which is one of your areas as well of expertise. And this is critical, first of all. And then you mentioned right now history. So we're talking about precisely. So I want to go a bit picking in some of the things you've been writing, and as well you are as well involved in a lot of this thought leadership. But I want to go through these kind of topics. Let's say if you look at what is going on in the world, we have a bit of a chaos, of course, and finance is a bit of a chaos organized around the financial centers and then all around the economic powerhouses and banks and organizations, regulators. But as well, we are going through a big change in society, both in technology. That is probably the biggest shift in technology. For instance, if you look at the last 30 years of the Homo sapiens, this is the biggest revolution we had. And as well, there's a huge perception, you are as well into blockchain, that this touches as well in terms of our personal, individual way of dealing with the money and the concept of money and the concept of finance. The organizations, like the established organizations you come from, and the new emergent organizations. So this is a bit of a chaos right now that we have. So I would like to pick from this theory of chaos and as well all the studies you did around change, and as well the context of history. How do you see this moment we're living in? Because I think one of the things that I like about you is that you have that capacity to go in history, to look deeper. But as well, I think we need to look at the facts if we want to understand our times. Because I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is that people are struggling to understand what is happening around them. All of us, I think, even the ones of us like doing continuous work to understand, because things change so fast. But at the same time, there are things that are really very continuous in history, that we need to pay the bills, we need to get our salaries, we need to get all these things. So how do you see this in the context, just from a theoretical perspective? I think it's interesting from your PhD and the research you've been doing. I want to touch that before we go to your career and more in fintech things.
You know, chaos theory is not about chaos in the layman's terms. I mean, if I were to explain to somebody outside of physics and mathematics chaos theory, it's about modeling phenomena that appear random, chaotic, that there is no pattern. Actually, there is a deep deterministic pattern there. And some of the elements of a model that is chaotic is the fact that it is very sensitive to the change of certain parameters, and also the element of attractors. So I see that we are in a stage in our society where there is that sensitivity around certain parameters. We have a lot of sensitivity around human rights. We have a lot of sensitivity about racial discriminations. And then if you think of the attractors, I think that is where we are lost a bit. We feel, it's our human nature, very uncomfortable when we don't know where we're going. Uncertainty is something that we humans are not comfortable with. And I think that is where we increase our fears and react automatically negatively and pessimistically, if you want, to what is going on. So in my view, I feel that we are at a stage where the attractors are not clear. In chaos theory, there's these local attractors that create local strong patterns. And this is where we are at. It's unclear, there's uncertainty, we can't handle it. And that is where a lot of philosophers and spiritual teachers are saying in this era that this is an opportunity for us to increase our consciousness level and our awareness level, and that will help us deal with this uncertainty. I don't know if I'm clear, but I do feel that the level of uncertainty has increased. We can't deal with it, and we have to find new ways. We are actually reaching out to technology to help us, but actually we are at an early stage, and it's creating, it seems to us that it's creating more complexity than it actually is. But I think that is where we are at this early stage of uncertainty. What solutions are we going to find to deal with this? This is where there's the interesting questions. For example, is a universal basic income a solution to the current more down-to-earth problems that you already alluded to, Dinis? For example, salaries and jobs and the inequality of wealth or the redistribution of wealth. Is that a solution? And is it the technology like central bank digital currencies that is going to bring that? Or is it induced by trying to quickly fix a deep social problem, and we're using technology to solve it, and we're unaware of the consequences?
Yeah, I want to go a bit deep on that level. So, especially coming to the financial sector, which is particularly probably the most complex one that we have, and as well the central system when it comes to our civilization. Because in one end, so I think our financial sector is probably the most advanced when it comes to technology, more advanced than the governments by far. But at the same time, we have like multiple diversities in the financial sector. So and I think picking in what you said, the attractors of the complexity that we have is that we have the legacy financial systems, we have the emergent financial system, and then you have like the advanced financial systems like the distributed systems, and now we have DeFi, a lot of these different things. So how do you see these three levels? Because this speaks about what you said about the change, because in one end, the human rights, even the investment based on sustainability is all right now behind this. The conscious of the social impact is all behind this, but we have these three different levels, and it seems like none of them is working with each other. But at the same time, on the middle of this, so let's say legacy systems and established organizations, emergent big players, and then we have, of course, the more radical disruptive players like the crypto, the digital currencies. But then we have as well the Silicon Valley and the Chinese mega players that are right now taking most of the economy. Sorry, it's a big question, but I want to understand how do you see this kind of context? Because this is a bit of a very complex system.
It is.
Yeah.
The way I've been thinking about this is the last 2 decades, we were witnesses of a war, if you want, between the legacy systems that you mentioned and the fintechs, the innovators, whatever they are, the Revoluts, the SoFi, or whichever companies, right? So that was going on. There was a war, and there was the question of who's going to win, who's going to replace, and so on. And now we are watching something very different. That movie, that episode is not playing anymore, the wars between the incumbents and the fintechs. And we have the blockchain for finance sort of sector that is very small but genuinely disruptive to both how the incumbents, the legacy systems, and the fintechs, because the fintechs essentially, if you think of it, they aimed to provide the same products and services as the legacy banks in a different way. Better, cheaper, more efficient, more accessibility, and so on, but pretty much the same. Now we have, as you said, the third emerging and genuinely disruptive wave of blockchain for finance that wants to manufacture financial services in a completely different way. And within that, we have the centralized and decentralized emergence. So what I see here is we can't distinguish all these changes from the deep social changes that are imminent. Because think of it, I mean, if we're going to go to some degree of decentralization in finance, that will also penetrate other layers of our life. Whether it is education, whether it is work, it will penetrate everything. So we can't think of it separately. This is all a wave of change that is coming at us and pressing questions. Are we going to change the ways we collaborate and organize? And finance is one aspect of it, but there's many other aspects. So it's all coming to us and asking this question. We've been organized by cities, by governments, by educational institutions that we attended. We've got passports and credentials from them. That's the way we've learned to organize our lives and to evaluate our productivity. So I see that we are really challenging all those ways that we see each other as individuals, as agents in the economy. So if I were to summarize, I'm saying that each of us, we are agents, economic agents with a broad sense in the economy, and we are trained to interact in a certain way. Everything that's coming at us right now is asking the question, can we change that? And DeFi, the extreme disruptor is offering us a way to change that. It even goes to the point of asking fundamental questions, like, what is a fundamental question? Should people work? What does work mean? And should work be the way you earn what we call a respected living? How can we how can we create value in different ways? More cooperatives, more, communities that are not physical or do not belong to corporations. We are challenging everything, the notion of a corporation. So I think it's all the same. We are putting a question mark to all the institutions and the entities that we are used to. And I find it fascinating. And I think that we have to have more of these discussions between us and have younger people and people with different, diverse experiences exchange views and ask these questions, because that's the only way to start getting some answers.
Yeah, that's a very good actually point, and I think that is the critical points for our time, because I think we are facing all of these things and they are all happening at the same time, but we are all a bit lost. And I think even I think the challenge probably is right now when it comes to governments and the relationship with financial service, because in one end, for instance, speaking in what you just said, let's say if you look at the legacy systems and the emergent fintechs, they're playing according to the rules. But then when we come to DeFi and even a lot of cryptocurrencies, which is right now still $500 billion more or less, if you look at all the ecosystem, and of course it's small in the $100 trillion global economy, but at the same time is already being quite disrupted, because the point is that a lot of players are right now using it to amplify other things. Even Switzerland is getting into this. So one of the things is, so when it comes to the financial services and fintech, and which is your area, one of your areas of major expertise. So how do you see the industry right now, and a bit more from your point and the research you've been doing right now? Because it's a key, of course, one thing is looking at the macro picture, but looking at specific things. So we have a lot of different things, but how do you see the part of fintech, and as well, how do you define it? And how do you think we can actually come up with the solutions that you're talking about?
Well, you know, the innovation in fintech that has happened over the past 2 decades varies by region considerably. So we have major innovations in the East, especially in China, and in emerging markets, be it Latin America or Africa. And the reason is because there wasn't, you know, the legacy systems there. So it's easier to start from scratch and have, you know, complete, really pure mobile banking services, for example, with M-Pesa in Africa, or the WeChat, Alibaba, Tencent tech fins in Asia that are really much more innovative than what we have in Europe and in the US. So there's been, you know, as I said, we have this variety across different regions. In the Western world, what I would say is there's been definitely a lot of progress in terms of opening up, making services more accessible, reducing the cost of different services, be it in investing, be it in lending, and so on. But I think that, you know, most of the capital that has funded these innovations is not only, of course, from Silicon Valley, but it is Silicon Valley minded. So they are funding growth. They are funding big companies and trying to see who's going to be the next sort of Amazon or Google in finance and so on. So in that respect, nothing has really changed. And in some cases, the companies that have been funded, the fintechs that have been funded, are not fintechs for good. They're about, for example, making it easy to trade with no commission fees. Well, that's not what the society really needs. right? I mean, it's good for the end user, but it's of no social real value. We haven't solved, for example, the issue of remittances, a huge global market. And to this day, I don't understand why we don't have a fintech with zero commission remittances. Why do we have a fintech with zero commission trading? Zero commission remittances has social value. So I guess what I'm saying is that there have been a lot of changes and a lot of value created in the fintech space. And you and I might be happy because we have some type of TransferWise or, Revolut or some such. But still, capital is not allocated the correct way. And this is a finance issue. Capital markets are pretty much operating in the same way. Capital markets are about how you allocate capital, whether it's in the public markets or in the private markets. There hasn't been a lot of genuine disruption in the venture capital model and on how, innovation is funded. So without being negative, I'm pointing out what is the genuine change. The genuine change has been in really delivering the same financial services in a better, faster, cheaper way, but the allocation of capital has not changed at all. And there has been little penetration in what I would call fintech for good. And in terms of, scaling fintech for good innovations, it's reasonable to expect that this will come from some emerging markets. The opportunities are clear in Africa, in Latin America, and in Southeast Asia, and that is why a lot of the money is now going towards those places. Yet to be seen whether we will have concrete results.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a very good point you make, and it opens a lot of questions. And I think probably the biggest question I have, shift a bit from what I wanted to ask you after, but is how do you deal with the geopolitics and as well, and you mentioned history, but as well the cultures? Because like you said, for instance, if you look right now, in terms of financial service, we have major 3 cycles in the world in terms of geolocation. We have Europe, where we're based, with UK, and now Europe a bit fragmented with Brexit and everything else, which has been complex, and of course Switzerland. And then we have like some centers. Then we have the US and Latin America, which is kind of a bit of non-existent in terms of powerhouse international. Then we have China right now that became, in the last years, actually, even words of Eric Schmidt, 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. So, but the rest, let's say, we still have around 50, close to 50% of the world population, like you said, without basic financial inclusion, without even identity. We're talking about that. So how do you tackle this? Because in one end, there's the private players, there's the public players, and there's the governments and the big players, but we're not still solving this. So there's a big opportunity for the financial industry that is still not tackled. And a lot of the big players are actually just washing their hands from Africa because they're afraid of the challenge that came with Africa. And like you mentioned, for Southeast Asia, which is going to be the fast growing part of the world civilization in terms of population and in terms of young population. So we have big challenges and big opportunities, but we're still not tackling this. So from your experience from Wall Street to actually Switzerland, where you're based, which are still leading capitals of finance and technology and innovation, how do you see this kind of the challenge? Because we need to solve this problem. And I think this is actually where there's a big business and financial possibilities, but as well a big challenge from geopolitical, social, lot of technological legacies and as well innovation.
You touch upon a great point when you mentioned, Dinis, about digital identity, which is really core to building, the financial inclusion that we should be building and offering globally. And unfortunately, we haven't made a lot of progress on that front. What I see there is that the way is for smaller countries to make the decision to adopt some kind of self-sovereign digital identity and start from there and build up. On top of that, the digital, if you want, financial services. We haven't seen that yet. There are some pilots, if you want, or intentions out there, but nothing has really happened on that front. Maybe we will see it out of the Nordic countries. Those are the possibilities that I see building on the digital identity. And I say that it is core because having looked closely and discussed with entrepreneurs that were and are looking to implement blockchain in, for example, crowdfunding, which could be considered an area that is fintech for good in terms of allocating capital to good projects and so on. But unless you solve the problem of digital identity, self-sovereign digital identity, you are really, you're not able to get the value from blockchain all the way through. So we have to be patient. There's going to be a lot of resistance from governments and agencies in terms of adopting these core elements that can allow us to put this together. I think it's also similar to asking the question, when will we be able to replace the existing internet, the existing web, with the next generation web, Web 3.0, which is hopefully a more fair internet than the one that we have now, that is very convenient but is not fair for the reasons that we both know. It was not built for this kind of increase in traffic, if you want, in use. And it has resulted in these huge duopolies, so to speak, the GAFAs of the world that are organizing the traffic on the internet and reaping all the value. How can that change? That is where the conversation really goes. If we can't change that, then any other change at the fintech level is marginal, if you want.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I think it comes back to that at the moment who controls the world economy and the world finance is effectively the players of the digital systems. And I think we're talking about the big Silicon Valley players and the big Chinese players, which are at the moment the hegemonic financial players. So I think on this level, there's an element, and coming back to your research and change and chaos, that is right now coming up and creating a big disruption. So when it comes to fourth industrial revolution, and especially with AI and blockchain, these technologies are shifting very, very fast. And for instance, with AI, we can already the entire world social psychological moods, which has been happening the last 4 years. Whatever you like it or not, there was the AI that disrupted the world moods. It was the use of fake news, the use of disruption propaganda in a very psychometric level that we don't talk so much, but it's AI. It's the first narrow AI that is already disrupting the entire global economy. And this has massive consequences in the capital markets because we see, of course, we have COVID as well, that is not technology on the middle of this. So in one end, we have COVID, and actually we still managed to keep the society moving forward because otherwise we have 40 million people affected. We probably will have like 100 million or 200 million or even half a billion people affected. If it wasn't for the capacity of technology, we still kept the ecosystem. But in the other end, we have the technology right now coming up with disruption that changes all the financial systems and everything else. So how do you see this velocity and change? And you are very, you've been researching a lot in change because the problem right now is that there's all the problems we've been talking so far, but there's an element of change that is out of the scope that we are tackling right now. Is that things are happening much, much, much faster. And at the moment we have already algorithms, you mentioned hedge funds, that actually can actually predict most of the things, can actually create a Brexit. Ultimately was partly created by a lot of technology. Whatever we like with political views or not, the division of the UK population was done with fake news and psychometric use of Facebook, and as well the US. And of course in China we have the social credit and the social ecosystem that is right now using technology. So I know that you're very particular focused on social impact and as well a conscious investment or sustainable investment. How do you see this with the velocity? Because the problem right now is that as the world is still coping with COVID and all these challenges, we have the elements of technology that are not stopping and actually going very, very fast. And then, like Ben Gorsley put it, we still are putting most of the money in gambling, gaming,
Killing.
and killing. So I think that is a fact, whatever we like it or not. So how can we reverse engineer this and as well not create a completely dystopic world? Because we can actually get this dystopic world happening very fast without even getting out of the control of people that we think we control and we're not controlling at all.
You know, Dinis, I think that this is not the first time that these weird conditions are happening. It's just that, you know, because of the speed that information travels nowadays, we are all aware of it and more disturbed and more uncertain and more fearful. Let's not try to see the world as if there's a war that is imminent and we're all scared. Actually, some people do think like that. Right? Their emotions are comparable to the emotions of people that are threatened by a war, 50, 100, 200 years ago. We're not in that situation. Again, for me, it's all the uncertainty that is created that is, we have to manage it. And the attractors that I spoke earlier about, there are some clusters of people and initiatives that are really looking to take advantage and are not benevolent and are going to use these technologies of the fourth industrial revolution not for good purposes. I think as individuals and in the teams that we work and the impact that we have, it is our personal choice and our responsibility to choose more benevolent uses and reduce the amount of time we spend in worrying about the negative consequences that are impending. Life teaches us that what we fear, that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, me and you, our kids, for our kids and so on, it's typically things turn out better. So for me, I try to manage this and focus on what I do today, my contribution, and I want to make a parenthesis. I think that each of us, we are teachers, whether we like it or not, by the way we do business, by the way we interact, by the way we speak, by our choices. So in that sense, we have a choice to use these technologies in benevolent ways and spread that message. Otherwise, we can't control the rest. The system is really very complex, and that is how we can contribute.
Yeah, I like that positivity, and I actually myself, I divide myself as between the technologist that is really seeing things going out of control, and there's the person more like the teacher, or at least the person that wants to learn, that creating solutions. So I think we need to keep this, but I think especially when it comes to finance and things like that, I see that the things that are getting a bit out of control. So as the last two questions, we passed already 1 hour, but it's been a fantastic, very, very deep discussion, but I think quite important for what we're facing right now. So we've been creating a lot of research books, like you mentioned in the beginning about the chapter that you wrote about change, and as well you created as well the platform Fintech, the Fintech platform that you've been actually promoting and doing, where you write a lot of things, and as well now you have your YouTube channel and other things. So can you tell us about the things you're doing? I think for the audience and for the people, this is about you as well. What are you doing to create this positivity? What are the channels? Where are the books? Where are the essays? And as well about the platform that you created, that is quite an amazing work as well, especially when it comes to the areas of research, the daily Fintech.
So, I've been writing for the last 5 years, started on Daily Fintech, 1 blog a week, always with insights around innovation, especially in Fintech, but not only. For example, this week I was writing about the resilience of Bloomberg and Excel. Bloomberg, obviously, is something very much entrenched in financial markets, but at the wholesale level, on trading floors and asset managers and so on. Very old technology that we all know that it can be reproduced at 1/10 of the cost of Bloomberg, and yet it is there and not disrupted. And then Excel, which is not strictly a financial tool, I would call it is a ubiquitous personal and business tool, and here it is. And I'm talking about why this is happening, and also what we are seeing. What is happening with Excel? Excel actually is becoming a platform integrating AI. I don't know if you've seen, Dinis, that OpenAI has licensed exclusively to Microsoft GPT-3, the amazing language processing innovation, tech innovation, and now it's been integrated. It's in beta testing, but it's integrated on Excel. So back to, I've been writing on Daily Fintech for this, for these innovations, and always thinking of business people and professionals and sharing with them what these advancements can mean, and highlighting them, what are the important ones. I do a lot of content creation beyond that. I have launched also a YouTube channel, and I do some interviews, but I also share my insights, always on Fintech or fourth industrial revolution technologies or books. Those are the areas that I'm interested in. I do weeklies. And in terms of work, I've been working this year, especially and increasingly with fintechs, but also with tech companies that need this thought leadership and independent thinking. And I work with them in the crossroads between business development, marketing, and PR, helping them with their campaigns and creating really innovative content for them and with them. And to me, this is very exciting, because for the first time, I'm seeing more openness in large companies to experiment with this and to earn media rather than pay, to get something published, and earn media the way I can teach that you can earn media. And I think this is, for me, it gives me a lot of pleasure to share how you could do things differently instead of trying to trick algorithms and pay ads to get your voice and your message, whether you're communicating with your clients, with your prospects, or just with the economy.
So I have two last questions, and thank you so much for the great insight. So one of the things is precisely about this part of the media. So as an influencer and one of the leading influencers, one of the things when it comes to fintech, and that's one of the things that I'm very focused, is the way these big media platforms are rewarding or not rewarding people like us. Because let's say, in order to do YouTube channel, we have to spend a lot of resources, time, technology, building, buying things, and as well getting views and promoting it. And as well, we are becoming big brands. You have 200,000 people following you between multiple channels, especially in LinkedIn. That is a massive, difficult challenge to manage. So are you conscious of building your own community and creating a sense of community around you, and as well building this relationship with the community, or you are more passing the research and the great content that you're doing? Because I think this is as well a future that I think we need to build, like you said, on a positive level for technology, because in the end of the day, this platform should be rewarding people like you, not just taking out of people like you. And as well, they need people like us. So that's the thing that I think is particularly interesting. And as well, for instance, at the moment, there was a study, actually most of the studies they're saying is that, for instance, with 1 million views on YouTube, you get around maximum, if you're lucky, $100 to $1,000. And you have to be very lucky because you have to have a huge machine behind you. And the same goes with Spotify right now, that is creating revenue streams. But it's really a big challenge. So we have all these big influencers that are doing massive effort, but you only really make business out of your influence, out of your media, if you have like at least 5 to 10 million views or followers. Otherwise, you don't get anything. So that's a big challenge, and I respect a lot of people that like us that are making this, because we're creating content. We are followed by a lot of people, but it's a massive challenge. And you in particular, I know that you're not doing like just picking content from other people. You're building serious content that takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought leadership and time. So it's not easy to be on the two layers of the research and as well syndicating and pushing it forward.
It's very interesting what you said, because I've been thinking about this more consciously. And it's about thinking how you think about your business and you're working on your business versus working in the business. So I have to do both. I'm a sole independent content creator, and I'm also working with my clients. And I don't aspire to monetize, the way that you're mentioning through, the clicks on YouTube or whatever, because I don't think that is, I don't think it is a way to work. It's definitely a challenge in what you mentioned about the digital communities is a concept that I've been thinking this year. What is my digital community? Is it my followers, my 200,000 followers, or not? Because obviously that is a question that one must ask, because it depends on the algorithm that, whatever it is, LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you are, chooses to work in a certain way that, certain people see the content or interact. I must confess that I'm in the process of thinking about this and gaining some insights and wisdom from our mutual friend, Thomas Power, who is a master in building digital communities. So if I were to summarize, I'm rethinking what is my digital community, how am I serving them, and should I redefine that community and how I interact with them.
Yeah, and I think this is particularly important to the financial models, because especially the irony of this is that you are as well, you're becoming a media financial platform as well with your content and your outreach. And I think this is probably where we can actually disrupt, but as well create more models that are more sustainable. Because at the moment, all people like us are dependent of sponsorships, depending of a lot of things. But this is a big thing. And I think the financial industry is spending billions of dollars in advertisements and forgets as well that it needs this. And I think that's a very good point. So I want to push this because I think it's a particularly important point for people like us, but everyone listening to us. Because if people are listening to us, they're doing YouTube or in the podcast. And they are, by all means, of course, YouTube is for free, but they are being bombarded by advertisement, bombarded by a lot of things that we don't control. So I think that it needs to be a more ethical way of us working with these platforms to change it, because they are mega $1 trillion companies, some of them, and they have as well to work with people like us. So it's a good point, and as well as a financial, media, and social point. So I just want to touch this, and I'm glad that you touch it in a very good way. So last question, and a very positive one, looking at the positive part, and you are very positive because of your history and as well the way, and I like that. So with COVID-19, we have all this acceleration of digital, because everyone, right, even most of the countries that were not even thinking to do anything digital, now they are obliged to do it. There's no other way, because we might still be another 6 months, 1 year under this, or even more, hopefully not. But everyone cannot travel. For instance, it's difficult to meet face-to-face. And I know that in a lot of countries, if you don't meet face-to-face, you'll never do a business. This right now has to change. So how do you see this? And as well, on the positive level, how you look at these opportunities as well that come out of these challenges?
Dennis, it's true that I've done business without meeting people face-to-face during this period, which I thought was impossible before. It's happened. However, at the same time, I must say that I think all of us are banking on relationships that we built over time, pre-COVID. And if that deposit, if you want, those assets are diminishing every day, then we might be faced with a problem. And I don't see that we can upskill ourselves in terms of being able to really feel the person and communicate the way we communicate and feel the person when we meet physically. I'm sure that might be the case, later, but it's not going to happen in the next 3 and 6 months. So I think that we will find ways to meet physically that are safer and in smaller groups soon. These will not be the old ways, the conferences typically that make us travel, or a very specific business purpose. We will. There's going to be innovation there. I don't know what it's going to be. It might be physical zones with small I can imagine we can call them hotels, where we meet for specific themes and maybe we spend time there, like, a week or 10 days, and we interact in those ways. And it can be a hybrid too. So, 10 of us meet physically, we work for 1 week together, and we fuse it with digital interactions that we share. So, we are really going to innovate on this front. Can I make an open invitation? Do we
that's the purpose of this.
do we go to my Greek island, and let's invite another 4 people from different areas, so 6 of us, right? We spend 1 week together, and we organize digital interactions while we're physically together, and we create amazing network effects and business.
No, I take the invitation, and as well I pass it to all our audiences, because I think probably passing another probably provocation in a good way to you, I think as well, is that be conscious about that community that you have, because 200,000 people is more than most of the banks have clients. And if you activate 1% or even 0.1% of that, is quite a lot of people. So I think we are creating value, and I think these ecosystems that I do with my YouTube channel and this series, and you with yours, and as well even what I learned from talking with you, and thank you for your time, is really key, because I think we need as well to find ways of creating different economical models. And I believe on that level I'm very positive. I'm probably less positive on the technology radical parts that I'm seeing myself, but I think on that, like you said, this ecosystem, we can create it, because in the end of the day, you can help a lot of people that are struggling, and there's a lot of people struggling. And I remember, for instance, just as an example, and probably you have case studies with this, is I had a case study that I work with a country in Africa, and I suggest to do a conference about fintech, and I create a fintech movement in the country. And it was because I did a conference that I pushed to be made by a lot of people. So I think it's really a lot of these things that we can actually do, and we're doing it, but sometimes we have to be conscious how to monetize and create financial models around this. And I think that is where I think your work, and I'll pass the provocation to you, that we should reflect this, because in the end of the day, sometimes we are so obsessed about talking about these $1 billion or multi-billion dollars companies, and they forget about creating models that are actually more sustainable. And I think is an area, probably the last call for you is, how do you define as well this sustainability part that you've been bringing in social impact, and as well all the areas of impact finance? So as the last question, and the more positive note to finish.
Well, I have to bring you a very concrete example of, social impact in maximizing economic value is always on my mind. And I always go back to what are my values and practice them in business. I give you one example. I'm an advisor to a company in Portugal, your home country. And this company is very innovative. What they do is they take cork, the native Portuguese tree, and they have they manufacture these blocks. They're like cubes from cork, and they have created specific molds. So from these blocks, like Lego, you can build anything. You can build furniture, you can build separations in your apartment, and so on. It's called Cork Brick. Okay, it's a new company. They did a crowdfunding campaign on cedars in the UK, and they were oversubscribed. But unfortunately, one of the major investors wanted to pay cash, and the owner of the company said, I can't take this, right? and he had to return all the crowdfunding and cancel all the crowdfunding.
Wow.
Okay. So this is, a choice of the entrepreneur to behave in a way that is ethical, if you want. So the company did not get funded, and then later they did another campaign, and it worked well. And why am I giving this example? Again, we have the choice to behave correctly and believe that that is the right way. The story can continue, and I can tell you that the investors that came in later proved to be more strategic investors. In a way, it was better. So wherever I can, in whatever projects I'm involved, I try to be with people that have these principles, and therefore what they're creating is going to be more sustainable, whether it's with respect to how they treat the people, how they treat the environment, how they treat their clients, whether they're transparent, and so on. There's a couple of how can I say, principles that I hold strongly, and they're more about integrity and transparency. I would say those are the two main ones that I use in my work.
Last thing, just can you tell us the channels? I know that you're quite well known, but it's always good, important to repeat. So the YouTube channel, all the channels that you have, if you want to, we put it all in the text there will be, but it's always good to come from you, at least the books and the channels and the places where you want people to find you, and as well where you can find your community.
Sure. So of course, as you mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn. I share content on a daily basis. Twitter also. I have my Facebook business page, Effie Pilarinu, there too. I on Daily Fintech, I write every Tuesday. I have a Medium blog too, and I write there every Thursday. And then every Wednesday, I publish on my YouTube channel, Effie Pilarinu, my audio or video content pieces. And of course, I can share with you, all these links. And for those that don't have a lot of time, I pick 3 main content pieces every month and send out a newsletter with those content pieces. And people are very welcome to subscribe to that mailing list if they don't have time to interact with the daily content that I produce.
Well, thank you so much. We'll put all of these links, and I'm sure people will find you. And I keep the provocation to start creating a model around your community, and I think all of us need to do that as an urgency. And thank you so much for your precious time and great insights, Effie.
Thank you so much, Dinis.